Zuko had forgotten how hard it was to read a mood. It had been easy in the cave. There had only been two, maybe three moods that anyone who came through the door would have. Ready to fight or ready to rant to someone who literally could not get away. He preferred the former more to the latter. Of course, mood number 3 was concern for whoever he just beat up, but that rarely affected Zuko unless it was Mighty Man. Well, and sometimes it led to mood number 1 rearing its head again. Regardless, in the cave he knew what had been expected of him, and his responses were almost formulaic. Someone entered with weapons, fight. Someone comes and starts blabbing about whatever, turn around and sigh every 5 seconds to show he did not care. Jet is nearby, try to punch. It had been simple, almost unthinkingly easy. Things were much more complicated out in the real world. He couldn't just fight anyone who was in a bad mood. He kind of forgot what you were supposed to do, assuming he had ever known. In the palace, people wore masks. They did not let their emotions be known unless it behind closed doors. He knew by now that his mother must have been constantly downtrodden and upset, but she never shown it to him. When Father Azula were in a bad mood, he could only try and make himself scarce or cower. None of that was applicable here. Sokka at least didn't seem upset at him. The boy was constantly grumbling as they walked, complaining about the volcano and how the people of the village were still convinced that Aunt Wu's predictions were correct, despite how they bid true and had nearly destroyed the town. So he was mad, but not at Zuko, which was nice. Katara was still frosty toward him, but she never really thawed at all, so that wasn't new. Even if it was frustrating, she seemed half convinced that Zuko would have been able to do more to detect or stop the volcano, although he was pretty sure that was more of an excuse to continue hating him for being Fire Nation than anything else, which sucked. But it wasn't something he could change, wasn't something he even wanted to change, but he understood. He came to accept that while Jet's actions had been extreme, his convictions and his hate had been the norm. From what he'd seen of this side of the Fire Nation, he understood it. He hated that he understood it. Anyway, so her anger was focused on Zuko, but it was something he was growing used to and was expecting to leave behind once they found Uncle or one of his secret friends from the list. Aang wasn't in a bad mood, but Zuko was honestly starting to doubt that the monk could even get upset about anything other than, righteous indignation about some kind of injustice or something. Anything less than that and the boy would be happily off playing with his lemur. Momo and Appa also didn't seem upset, though Aang was trying to keep them from flying too much, as the sudden heat of the volcano was apparently not been pleasant for the big furred creature. So really it was just the Water Tribe siblings. But still, it was enough to make him feel awkward and prevent him from breaking the silence of their hike. "Look!" Aang said from a spot at the front of their line. "A sword made out of a whale's tooth." Zuko peeked around the others to see Aang hold up a strange, almost familiar blade. He wouldn't call it a sword, but it seemed to be well made. It wasn't any style Zuko had ever seen before, but it kind of reminded him of... Sokka pushed past his sister, nearly stumbling down the hill in his haste. "Let me see that," he demanded, grasping when the instrument was in his hands. "This is a Water Tribe weapon." Zuko blinked. Water Tribe? Were they that far north already? He hadn't thought so, but he hadn't actually seen a map since the Stronghold, and with all their detours, it was hard to tell how fast Appa could go. It wasn't as cold as he thought it would be. "See if you can find anything else," Sokka demanded. The team was practically vibrating with excitement as he looked around the clearing. Zuko wasn't sure what he was looking for short of another pile of weapons, which he found, or one weapon at least. He called Sokka over when he spotted a broken arrowhead among some leaf litter. It was a Fire Nation flaming arrow, though, so he wasn't sure if that was what they were looking for. "It's burned," Sokka said as he wiped soot off the tip. Zuko nodded. It's part of Fire Nation tactics to wrap arrowheads in something flammable. Sokka nodded, his face scrunched in a way that meant he thought we were going a mile a minute. He moved to a nearby tree, touching a spot on the trunk that was marked with both gashes and soot. "There was a battle," he claimed. "Water Tribe warriors ambushed a group of firebenders." The boy followed a trail that was all but invisible to Zuko, running down the hill and sprouting off details of battle he had never seen. The firebender would have thought he was making it up, if not for the purpose of his movements, the certainty of his words, and the way his irrationality led them to clue after clue. They ran through the woods, ending only where the trees were left behind in favor of a sandy beach, and he was forced to admit that whatever trail he had been following had ended. Zuko was still impressed. Sokka had mentioned being a master hunter, but their dinner certainly hadn't supported that claim. Now, though, now he believed it. Suddenly, Katara gasped. "Wait, look!" she cried, pointing to a small wooden ship halfway up the shore. "It's one of our boats!" Sokka cried, pure joy shining in his eyes. The siblings ran across the beach. "Is it Dad's boat?" Katara asked. Sokka grinned back at her. "No, but it's from his fleet." "Oh, so not that far north. It was their father. The one Sokka had mentioned leaving back in that horrible divide. That made sense. Did it mean it was going to get colder?" For once, Katara wasn't glaring at him as he poked at the firewood and spark rocks and brought the cooking. Instead, they sat in a circle around the fire, the siblings idly theorizing about the ship until Katara succumbed to sleep. Neither Sokka nor Zuko fell asleep as easily. Instead, Sokka pushed around the coals with a stick, mouth screwed up as he was lost in thought. Zuko was having a bad night. The kind of night where he hated even the darkness of his own eyelids. The kind of night where every wind made him shudder with cold and resign himself to spending the night counting the stars just to remind himself that he could see them. "I tried to go with him," Sokka said softly. He didn't have to explain. There had only been one him when he could be talking about. I was younger than Aang when they left, but I was so sure I was a good enough warrior that I could come along. I felt like I had to be a man. "What happened?" Zuko asked softly. "He didn't let me," Sokka said. "He said that being a man is knowing where you're needed most, and told me that it was staying with Katara." He shrugged. "I still don't really know if he meant that, or if he was just trying to keep me safe and out of the war." Zuko was silent for a moment, completely unable to relate to the concept of a father who wouldn't use every conceivable opportunity to test their children's abilities to rise to the challenge. Father would have never even considered leaving either him or Azula behind, regardless of their age. He would have been the first to commission their child-sized armors if the need ever arose. "I miss him so much." Zuko couldn't relate to that either. "I just wanted to make him proud." Now that he could relate to. "Your father would be a fool not to be proud of you, Sokka." "You think so?" Zuko sent the boy an irritated scowl. "Don't hunt for compliments, it's annoying. You're traveling with the Avatar, the only person who actually stands a chance about making a difference for good. You helped save a town from a volcano. Your boomerang can go through a canyon like it's sentient. You didn't fall for Jet's stick. You saved me. You're brave, strong, intelligent, and kind. If your father isn't proud of that, he doesn't deserve your devotion." Sokka smiled for the first time since seeing the ship, his shoulders relaxing. "Thanks. Yours should be too, if that means anything." Zuko snorted meanly, turning away from the boy and pulling his blanket close. "I'm serious," the other boy insisted. "You went through actual torture for years, and you're still super strong and not crazy and still care about helping people? Even people from the same nation as those that hurt you. That's impressive, Zuko." Zuko was silent for a long moment. "My father wouldn't care about any of that. He'd be ashamed that I was captured in the first place. Anything he would call kindness, he would call weakness, especially if it was toward the Earth Kingdom. Without my bending, he would consider me absolutely useless, if he even bothered to acknowledge that I was his son." He didn't look at the other boy. Instead, kept his gaze straight ahead, still tracking the stars. "I spent most of my life trying to make him proud, but Father always preferred my sister. She was a prodigy, well beyond me in bending, schooling, and diplomacy despite being 2 years younger than me. She was the golden child, and I was nothing. He used to say that she was born lucky, and I was lucky to be born. For a long time, I wanted nothing more than make him proud, so I did everything I could. There's a lot of it that I'm not proud of. Never mind that I was younger than Aang when I did it. The truth is, I don't care if he's proud of me anymore. In fact, if I heard that he was, I'll be warning that I was on the wrong path. Why does your backstory just keep getting fatter? Sokka asked, and Zuko idly wondered if it was more sad or less sad that his father and the Fire Lord were the same. Then I bet Uncle T would be proud of you. Zuko smiled softly. Thanks. I hope so. Sokka opened his mouth as though prepared to say something horrific, like ask about it, when a strange noise brought them both on red alert. Sokka grabbed his boomerang, and Zuko silently pulled his scabbard out from under the pillow. Who's there? Sokka demanded. A man emerged from the shadows. Not one that Zuko recognized, but one whose facial features were obviously Water Tribe as his injuries were Fire Nation. Half of his torso were covered in bandages, and the sickly strange scent of burn medicine permeated the air as he neared. Sokka? The stranger asked, and Zuko was hit with a startling realization that this was the father Sokka missed so dearly. And this was fine. Zuko was great with fathers, really. He has a fantastic track record with them. Sokka gasped. Bato? He asked, a sliver of pure joy dancing in his voice. Oh, not a father. Zuko had a hard time trying to convince himself not to be relieved. Katara and Aang woke at the yell, and the girl was quick to follow Sokka. The elder teen ran to give the stranger a hug. The man was grinning broadly. Sokka, Katara, it's so good to see you two. You've grown so much. Aang called out a greeting, but Zuko didn't. He doubted he would be getting a warm welcome from anyone with a burn that large. Luckily, no one seemed to notice as Sokka and Katara started to pepper the man with questions about their father. Soon enough, the chill got to their group, and Bato started leading them into the abbey, telling the Water Tribe teens stories of their father as they walked. They made their way into a large abbey, and the air filled with nuns and permeated by a million different strong scents. Superior, Bato called, smiling warmly when one of the elder nuns broke off to come toward him. These are Hakoda's children. They've been traveling with the Avatar and their friend. He faltered, turning to Zuko. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. His eyes suddenly turned sharper as the well-lit courtyard revealed the gold eyes, pale skin, and dark hair that the dark forest had concealed. Katara growled. He's not our friend. Sokka scowled at his sister. He's my friend. And mine, Aang added, but no one seemed to give him much mind. I'm Zuko. He's Fire Nation, the girl spat at the confirmation. Bato took a step back, pulling the Water Tribe teens behind him as he put his hands on his knife and angled his body to that the bandages were as far away from possible from the firebender. Zuko hunched in on himself. Yep, that father figure track record was going great. Aang immediately stepped forward. It's okay, Zuko's a really good guy, Sokka interrupted, looking implorably at the still protected Bato. He's my friend. We've been traveling with him for a long time, and he's been nothing but helpful. He is still Fire Nation, Sokka. You can't just... What, is he injured? The superior interjected, or a convent is sworn to provide aid to all who come in peace. Do you come in peace, young man? I do, ma'am, but I'm fine. His words were harsher than they should be, biting, fueled by the awkwardness, defensiveness, and fear that being near this Bato guy was stirring in him. The woman frowned and stepped forward, slowly and carefully pulling up his arm from where the wounds from the pulling at the manacle still existed as scabs. Dropping that, she rose one clinical hand to prod around the bruise on his forehead where he gotten from the arrow at the stronghold. Oh, he forgot about that. No one in the fortune-telling village had mentioned it beyond that look the blacksmith had given him. He had occasional headaches, but those were nothing new. He began them a lot ever before his daring Avatar rescue. There was a lot of light outside of the cave, and a lot of sound and smell, and just about every type of stimulant that should be normal was, well, overwhelming to him. Oh, he said softly. She smiled at him kindly, an old lady way. Come with me, and I can take you to our healer. You can meet up with your friends once she's looked you over. Zuko glanced out of the corner of his eye. Katara was still glaring at him, as was Bato. The stranger hadn't moved an inch out of his protective position, still hiding his wounded side. Sokka was glaring at his sister, and Aang seemed to be pouting that no one was looking at him. "Okay," he allowed, and followed the woman into the halls. His track record with healers was a bit better, at least. It was a decent amount of time before Zuko was allowed to leave the healer's room. A new salve had been applied to his wrist wounds. They were mostly scabbed now, but the healer had insisted that the medicine would keep it from being infected and would somewhat reduce the scarring. Zuko thought they didn't need to bother with that last bit. His entire wrist was nothing but roping rough scabs from years of pulling at it. She had already declared that he didn't have a concussion, which was not something he had even considered, though he supposed it was a relief to know he didn't need to worry about it. His responses to her questions about light sensitivity had concerned her at first, until he explained that they had started before his injury. She still wasn't happy about it, but without any of the other symptoms, she wasn't overly concerned. Now, however, he was leaving their office with directions on how to get to the Water Tribe's room, and he had no clue if he should follow them or not. The man hadn't exactly seemed all that eager to see him, and Zuko doubted that had changed much. He couldn't blame him, not with those bandages that covered a wound as bad as it looked. His eye had hurt enough, but half of his body? It would be agony. He wouldn't be happy to see another Fire Nation man, even if Zuko wasn't really a bender right now. He paused as he neared the door to the room, still wrestling with himself about whether or not he should enter. As he hesitated, he accidentally eavesdropped. Okay, so he purposely eavesdropped. If they were talking about him, he wanted a hint about what he should do. Bato's voice drifted from the room. "Happened to your necklace the day you got it? I would have sworn on all I owned that it would never leave your neck." "The same thing happened to Mother. The Fire Nation stole it from me." Zuko stopped, his heart going cold as the pure stone fury in the girl's voice. He knew she had the potential for anger and hate, but he had never heard her like that. It was cold, full of hatred and anguish. "Oh, Katara," the man said softly, the sound of rustling as he drew her into a hug. "I'm sorry. I don't." She sounded close to tears now, and Zuko knew that he should leave, that this was a deeply personal conversation that was not for him. He couldn't bring himself to move, as though her sadness was attuning her with a pitch that matched his own, drawing him to it and trapping his feet. "They took everything from me when they killed her. I didn't have anything left of her but that necklace, and now I don't even have that." "You never should have seen that," the stranger said softly, as Sokka started making soft, wordless, soothing noises. "Should never have gone through in the first place. I'm sorry that your necklace is gone, but you know it's not true that was the last thing you had of her, right?" "What do you mean?" she said hesitantly. "You have her courage," the man said, "and that is no small gift. And you have her love, her protectiveness, her temper." He chuckled. "You had it when you was younger too, but now I can barely look at you without seeing Kaya's face." Zuko softly stepped back, feeling strangely settled. He had never understood Katara, not really. He acknowledged her hatred, but never saw why it was so strong, so personal. Now he knew, and he felt he understood her. He could no longer begrudge her hatred. If it would have done him any good, he would have hated as well. He wasn't sure what he could say, though. He doubted it would be a good idea to pop up and say, "Hi, Zuko here. You say the Fire Nation took your mother from me? That's something we have in common." Still, there was a peace in knowing her anger had reason, that it was a hate he would have felt just as strongly in her shoes. He wished he had someone like Bato when Mom had left, though. Anyone who would try and comfort him. Anyone who didn't make him feel like he was crazy for even wanting to acknowledge that she existed. There had been no funeral. She was just gone. No one else would ever talk about it. It didn't matter now. It had been years. He shouldn't have let it get to him. It did, though. If she was still there, alive, or Father had gotten away with banishing him, would any of this ever happen? He should be over it. The teen shook himself heavily. Well, he wasn't going to bother trying to sleep in that hut. Maybe he could get the fire out by the boat going again. He was used to sleeping outside. He didn't want to be in a room tonight anyway. He wanted to count the stars until he could feel the sun. The bar was loud and rowdy. A familiar crowd yelled and cheered as they watched a massive man arm wrestling with a thin, dangerous-looking woman. The bout was interesting when a bag of coins the size of a man's head landed on the center of the table, and both parties let go as the weight of the bag shook the table. The crowd silenced as they looked at the sight of the large firebender in mutton chops and rigid armor heading up a small group of Fire Nation soldiers. The woman eyed the bag. "You dropped something?" she asked. "Maybe. Could be mine, could be yours." And how do you suppose we determine this custody battle?" The man slammed a necklace with a light blue pendant onto the table. "This bag belongs to the woman with the shishu, or at least, it will." The woman's single visible eyebrow rose and she peeked inside the bag, smirking when she saw the denomination of the coins. "Well, looks like it might be mine after all. Let's talk."